Well, thank you and good morning. And I must admit, I was quite happy actually to travel all the way from Europe to Australia, especially after having heard wonderful stories from my brother who traveled here 9 months, 20 years ago. He actually was very happy to carry my suitcase, but unfortunately I didn't need that. So good morning. Thank you for again inviting me to do this opening keynote for the conference. And I would like to provide you with a wider sustainability context on how infrastructure actually can improve on the quality of life. But first, a slight personal anecdote. I must admit, I didn't only travel to Australia. I had a stop halfway in India for another conference on sustainability, actually a conference of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. That one took place in Chennai, and I used the opportunity to, after the conference, travel for a weekend to the Himalayas to go walking there. And we took the train from Delhi to Dehradun, which is about a 6-hour train ride north. It wasn't as cramped as this one, but these were a lot of trains we saw passing by. And in that train, actually, there were a lot of people just traveling from A to B for work or for education. But also a lot of people, when the train stopped, were coming into the train to sell foods, to actually a guy just carrying this pile of books. You could pick one of the books if you wanted to have a read for the next couple of hours. So a lot of things going on actually around that train, and also along the railroad, you saw those livelihoods popping up. So for me, this actually stressed the importance of infrastructure in letting people grow, in improving quality of lives of people, something which you in Europe don't see that much anymore, but which in India, to me, was very obvious, actually. So who am I? Should push this one. I'm the World Business Council and World Economic Forum coordinator for Arcadis. I'm also part of the what we call the Global Core Sustainability team of Arcadis, setting up our strategy and implementing it. And apart from that, I'm also the global lead for natural capital, which means actually a way of how we can recognize the importance of which the natural environment, what the natural environment brings us. And by realizing this, actually, including it in the decisions we make as a business or as a government, and actually become more resilient. So this is what I'm also very passionate about. In the last year, I was fortunate enough to join in the negotiations in Paris in the COP21. I joined in the World Economic Forum in Davos, and actually, again, 2 weeks ago in the WBCSD conference. This is events where actually the leaders of the world, the businesses and governments, where they join and discuss on the state of the world and on the challenges we actually face. So like climate change, rising sea levels, rapid urbanization, but also increasing scarcity of resources. Infrastructure was a very important part in all those conversations, actually. It popped up everywhere again. Infrastructure, again, as I stated before, it allows people to travel from A to B. But it also provides people with water, with electricity. It's about 663 million people nowadays in the world who don't have access to safe drinking water. It's about 1.2 billion people who are without access to energy. Actually, results from studies show that quantity of infrastructure is important to enhance the economy. But it's actually the quality of infrastructure which benefits even more in producing productive and efficient outputs that has greater impacts on sustainability and actually economic growth. So infrastructure done well, I believe, can actually improve dramatically on the quality of life. So for me, struggling with this one, sorry. For me, sustainability is not only about being compliant or doing good, actually. Sustainability for me is a growth strategy, and it's really adding value to society. So again, if you look at society, the population in the world's urban areas are actually increasing with 200,000 people a day, all of whom need affordable housing, need social, transportation, and utility infrastructure. It's again climate change, global urbanization, increasing population density, which are further driving this infrastructure demand which we have. It's the World Economic Forum who estimates that the current global investment gap for infrastructure is $1 trillion per year. Between now and 2030, they estimate this will actually be a 14 trillion US dollar shortfall. And apart from this economic prosperity, there's also infrastructure is actually a key element to the climate change agenda. So done badly, I think it's a major part of the problem. For half of the infrastructure actually accounts for more than half of the carbon emissions. Done right, it can be a major part of the solution, vital to both climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. So for me, infrastructure done in a sustainable way can actually add long-term value to society and to the environment. So I would like to take you through three trends, three observations I had actually going through all the events in the last year, and link them to the importance of infrastructure. Oh, okay, you saw a little bit of the presentation. Going back to the Sustainable Development Goals, which I would want to talk a bit more about. So last year, September, the global leaders actually agreed upon 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are also referred to, maybe you've heard about it, as the global goals. And if they are completed, it would mean an end to extreme poverty, to inequality, and to climate change by 2030. So within these 17 goals, there are a staggering 169 targets, which actually explain in more detail what the world would look like in 2030. And two of those targets, to me, really address to infrastructure. So it's Sustainable Development Goal number 9, which is about industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So it's actually developing quality, reliable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure. So including the regional and trans-border infrastructures, supporting economic development and human well-being, and all with a focus on affordable and equitable access for all people. Goal number 11, which is about sustainable cities and communities, also includes sustainable infrastructure. So this is by 2030, actually, allowing everybody to have access to safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport systems. So road safety has improved notably by expanding public transportation in this case. It's actually also addressing the needs of the people, the vulnerable people in society, women, children, older people, and the disabled people. A way of actually how we could try and fulfill those goals in a sustainable way could be through mobility-oriented development. So this is, again, with more people flocking into the cities. There's a need for transit hubs. So to deliver actually the increasing high value on, again, economically, environmentally, and socially. And to meet these demands, you should actually, in an early phase, start planning, collaborating in a truly holistic outlook needs to be a priority. So not just for, again, the obvious economic and environmental benefits, but also socially, for public health, inclusion, and quality of life. So this is what mobility-oriented development actually focuses on. It analyzes a broad range of socio-economic factors, and it becomes possible to predict and quantify, again, those financial, social, and environmental benefits that will come from the proposed transport hub. So this approach provides stakeholders with real and tangible outcomes that will be delivered through investment in improving this mobility. So it covers a wide range of areas. If you would look at indicators from an economic impact, there could be the numbers of jobs created, the predicted GDP growth, increasing local land value and property value. From a social impact, it could be the reduction in the average commuting time, also the increase in tourism, or the creation of places where people would love to work or to live. And from an environmental perspective, it's actually lowering of waste, the reduction of the carbon footprint, and better use of the natural resources, like water and gas. But that's not the only thing which the mobility-oriented development does. It's also delivering value, actually, in the mobility. So if you look at this one, it's delivering value in the hubs. So actually showing the routings, the informations, and the different shops in the hubs. It's at the hubs, optimal interconnections of all transit modalities. It's about service provided, like sports and entertainments at those hubs. It's wider around the hubs, like short and medium and long-term, long-distance connectivity, or maybe mixed use of living, of either working or leisure at that location. And it's also beyond the hubs. It's about making it a better place through investable and sustainable master planning of property development and of transportation. So it looks not only at the hub itself, but it looks also at the wider environment. And a case study where this actually has been applied would be the Malaysia high-speed rail. This is actually where we started planning and designing the high-speed rail based on the existing physical characteristics and the socio-economic strengths of each of the locations which we were supposed to be connecting. Then we actually started building the corridor, unlocking the potential facilitated through this connectivity. So the following slide will give you an idea of what the different locations look like which we connected and what actually were the strengths of the different locations. And it's actually by international case studies which tell us that socioeconomic benefits is constrained or delayed when this high-speed rail infrastructure investment is made without actually first planning the station destination areas. If you look at the outcomes, of using this mobility-oriented development, it will actually enhance international competitiveness, and it will attract foreign investors. And for these people, actually, it had real value as well. So for the entrepreneur, he did expand his business by opening different branches at the different hubs. It improved the quality of life, really the social capital development for the student, which was allowed to easily travel between the place where she would live and the university where she would go to. And it saved this family actually up to 3 hours of traveling time when they would want to visit their niece. So these are the social advantages. At the same time, there were also environmental advantages because the car use actually decreased drastically, less congestion, less pollution, and less carbon emissions. So what could we learn from this, or what could Australia learn from this? Substantial investments in infrastructure expenditure in Australia at the moment, with new projects being planned and constructed and operated. Like, for example, in Sydney, you're currently seeing the planning of construction of 3 big infrastructure projects in the city, the 3 biggest ones actually for decades. So this is the light rail, Sydney Metro, and West Connects. There's a strong community pressure for these projects to be delivered in a sustainable way. So as the rest of the world, and particularly across Europe where I come from, I really found it notably in traveling around, I do see that we are ahead of the world. We continue to improve sustainability performance. It's no longer acceptable actually to the community or other stakeholders to continue to develop infrastructure projects without considering the social, economic, and environmental consequences. So what Australia maybe could learn from around the world, and actually what I'm learning in the practice in Europe, is that elevating the importance of sustainability within the planning and delivering of infrastructure projects is leading to really better and more socially acceptable outcomes. That's about trend 1. The second trend I actually saw is investing in natural infrastructure. And hearing the intro of Anthony, you framed it as being green infrastructure. I see globally there's different, the meaning is the same, there's different wording. In Europe we would say natural, over here you apparently say green infrastructure. It's a trend which I came across at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development meetings. It's a trend I came certainly also across at the COP21 in Paris as being a way how to mitigate for climate change. It's including the so-called nature-based solutions when designing sustainable solutions. So investing in infrastructure, actually, it can reduce costs, improve operations, generate financial gain, or enhance reputation of the business or government applying the solution. But additionally, it contributes also to climate change mitigation, and at times is the more favorable, more cost-effective solution for adaptation. So what is natural infrastructure or green infrastructure? It's planned and managed natural and semi-natural systems, which provide solutions for otherwise grey infrastructure solutions, and also have additional benefits, again, like the ones on climate change mitigation. And natural infrastructure solutions can be applied at very different scales, either from a housing or building level, but also in the broader landscape, in rural areas, terrestrial areas, in oceans, freshwater areas. And on the local level, it could be about water purification. It could be about permeable pavements, green roofs, rainwater harvesting, or as we use it in the Netherlands a lot, it's protecting the hinterland from flooding, actually. The example I would want to give you is related to infrastructure. This is an area in the Netherlands, Soestduinen. But in the Netherlands, like in many other countries, we have a lot of power lines actually scattering, running over the countries. Management practices currently used to ensure safety of these high voltage power lines can sometimes have a negative effect, a negative impact on the natural environment underneath these lines, while also actually seeing very high maintenance cost. So what if you take a different starting point? Obviously ensuring the safety, that's first, but thinking it through differently and actually acknowledging the added value that the natural environment could bring you. But also from a cost perspective, there is an advantage, as well as from the biodiversity perspective. So why not reduce the area of mowing and clearing, as well as the frequency of mowing and clearing, by installing, for example, a structure of edges and grassy borders, which require fewer management interventions, or maybe even restoring specific natural environments that are stable, where clearage options actually serve no purpose. By doing this in the Netherlands, in this example in Soestduinen, it actually resulted in a vegetation maintenance cost with a return of investment between 6 to 12 years, and a 50% cost reduction on a 30-year timescale. And there were co-benefits as well. It's about enhanced water purification and storage. It's climate regulation, which was increased in the area. Also, the biodiversity could actually flourish. There were native species and plant animals returning. And all of this strengthened the social license to operate and the good relationship with the stakeholders. And there was more, because it did not only profit the power line operator, the owner, tenant. It also brought a value to, for example, the Hilton Hotel, which is quite close by, because the recreational area close by enhanced. It also actually increased on the value of the houses in a municipality, which is close by. People wanted to live there because there's more and more continuous green environment in the surroundings. And last but not least, there's a water producing company called Vitens. This is their infiltration area. And actually, by less heavy machinery, which was needed for cutting the vegetation going over underneath the areas of those power lines, the soil was less compacted, and there was more infiltration of rainwater. So they had a benefit from it as well. So what can we learn from this? As a nation, Australia is strongly reliant on natural assets. And it's important, I think, to continue to challenge the norms and avoid to do the things you've always done, how you've always done them. It might be time to turn your thinking and think outside of the box in the way you deliver your infrastructure projects. So why not pick more on this green infrastructure perspective? Trend number 3, I want to take from a picture picked up in Paris. And it's also a risk identified if you have read through the Global Risk Report from the World Economic Forum. It's about failure to adapt to climate change being one of the highest risks actually identified by the World Economic Forum, but it's also about financing the climate change mitigation and adaptation. This was really key during the Paris Agreement and the conversations there. And it's key to also now implementing the Paris Agreement. There's many discussions around the new Green Climate Fund, but also on the other approaches were discussed, like carbon pricing, carbon taxes, and climate bonds. And I would like to elaborate a bit more on the green bonds. The key to the success of the green bonds is actually that investors do not have to choose between financial returns and commercial benefits. As green bonds actually offer the same financial terms as other bonds, with the added bonus that their green labels enable investors to identify as environmentally beneficial investments. So if a portfolio manager actually would have to choose between an ordinary bond and a green bond, and both have exactly the same yield and rating, and a comparable price, then the green benefit actually is an extra bonus. So for investors who care about the environment, who care about the climate risk, but cannot address this risk due to the restrictions of their mandates from actually asset owners, green bonds present an enormous opportunity. For investors who do not care about climate change, a green bond is no different from other similarly rated bonds and can still be a great investment opportunity. So funds from green bonds issuances actually can be allocated to new projects. It can be allocated to refinancing existing projects. As long as the proceeds go to the green projects, actually, the bonds can be labeled as green. And low carbon transportation is one of the category of projects that can qualify under the so-called green bonds principles. But will we get there with only the green bonds? I would actually think that a combination of financing mechanisms will be the most successful to reduce the risks of all the challenges we face and to deal with the developments we actually do need. So, but are our regular response circles sufficient enough for this? Why do we only respond to extreme weather events when they have happened, or to extension of cities when they're already in their way? Why not act more proactive? So also concluded again by the World Economic Forum, financing is one of the main barriers to speed up modernization and tackle the huge challenges we face. But lack of money doesn't seem to be the issue, since the investors are looking for investment opportunities. I think the challenge is to find the right time to invest, the so-called moment of change. Like several developments which are planned at the same time, combining them, or a set of ambitions, maybe raising the competitive or sustainability level, combining them, or opportunities to reduce risks, several opportunities in one place. After having identified these moments of change, then combine the teams working on the design, the financial design, the civil engineering, and the stakeholder management expertises, and rescope this moment of change into a portfolio of bankable opportunities. Rescoping could be then again widening the development of the scope to create return on investment, or maybe splitting up a development to make it create return on investment, or maybe introducing ecosystem services, like mentioned before, or other cost-effective solutions. The result will, in the end, be an overview of your investment opportunities. And since you already have the stakeholders on board in those conversations, and the bankability is there, this really is the way to implementation which has been paved already. This method we would call optioneering. So what can we learn from this? Australia is particularly vulnerable to a number of threats like flooding, drought, bushfires, sea level rise, and water scarcity. And recent results actually of the Sustainable Cities Index, which has really been released a couple of weeks ago by Arcadis, show that the Australians' key cities are falling in the bottom quartile for climate resilience. So planning infrastructure developments in a more holistic way, including all stakeholders involved, is critical to the challenges we face. So remember, I linked infrastructure to climate change before, stating that infrastructure is a key element of the climate change agenda, that when done right, it can be a major part of the solution, vital to both climate change and mitigation and climate change adaptation. Again, remember also the World Economic Forum estimating that the current investment gap for infrastructure is $1 trillion per year. Couldn't we join hands here? Isn't the challenge for infrastructure developments to combine the effort of building solid infrastructures and at the same time contribute to the Paris Agreement? When done so, I believe that really that it will also contribute to society in a wider sense than only adapting and mitigating climate change solutions and only enhancing the infrastructure. It will also enhance the quality of life. So for me, it's about doing it right, about our infrastructure being a major part of the solution. vital to climate change mitigation and adaptation, and also contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. Or in very short, you could say, it's about improving the quality of life. Thank you.